And let's take the first question. Is from William from PJ in Malaysia. How much information do I need before I can make a decision that's not considered blind faith? Okay, that's a good question, right? So, how much information do I need before I can make a decision that's not considered blind faith? And the answer is different from person to person. Why? Because some people's faiths are a little bit greater and some people's are a little bit less. Everyone's faith is very different. So you couldn't say that every single person, as long as you have 65% information, you have enough. It's kind of one of the processes of learning to know yourself better and when you can make a good decision. And you also have to be realistic with yourself also, knowing how much information you can really get. You know what I mean? Like there's some situations you can't get everything. Like even if like say you needed 70% for you to make a decision, but let's say the amount of information out there was only 60%, you have to realize and be comfortable with that because that's as much as we have. But you're gonna have to make a decision anyways, right? So it's gonna depend from person to person, and that's something that you need to learn how to understand yourself in a much better way so that you can make the decision at the right level. So how am I gonna know how much you need, William? And the answer is I wouldn't. You would have a better idea of it, okay? So I hope that everyone kind of get to learn to know yourself, where you're at, how much information or how much experience you really need before you can make that decision. Great question. Let's go to the second question. Second question is Chi Yin in Taiwan. Cool, Chi Yin, Taiwan. When I go through difficulties, thinking of the past is the last thing I do. So what should I do to not forget the past? Cool. So going through difficulties thinking of the past is the last thing I should. Okay, that makes sense. So what should I do to not forget the past? Okay, so let me tell you one thing. The reason why difficulties allow you to forget the past really easily. Okay, I talk about this a little bit in the past, in prior lectures, but the one thing you have to understand is when you start to become emotional or when you're going through a very stressful time, there's like these chemicals and stuff that click in your head, but the one thing that happens to your brain is your prefrontal cortex, where all your emotion, like your learning, your motivation, and also controlling of emotions is all in the prefrontal cortex, but that shuts off. And this is why when people are very emotional, they start to make really terrible decisions, right? Like terrible decisions. Because you're no longer thinking rationally, you're no longer thinking in the right way, you're thinking very emotionally. And if you understand yourself in that manner, the first thing you need to do is, no matter what, if you're going through a difficult time, you need to get over the emotional part of it first, or you have to calm yourself down. And that might be a little bit difficult, but that's the first thing you have to really do. Like, Chien, I hope you recognize that when you're in that emotional state, you can't. And that's why you have to recognize it, calm yourself down, bring yourself down to a level area, and then from there, you can start to think a little bit more rationally and reasonably. And from that point on, you can start to remember and think of like, wait a second, why am I thinking this way? Hey, my friend's always been there for me. Why would they do this? I mean, haven't you guys ever had that before? When you have like a best friend and they say something bad about you and off the top you're just angry. But then if you calm down, you think to yourself, wait a second, this is my best friend. My best friend would never do this. They've never done this before. I wonder what's going on in their life. I wonder if they really said that. Is this the truth? Because when you start to think normally what happens, like, no, this has never happened before. I wonder why they did this. And this is when we're able to kind of think reasonably and rationally and remember all the things in the past. But the first thing you need to do, you do have to do is you have to bring your emotion and your stress down, and then you have to start thinking more rationally and think more reasonably too. Okay? All right. Thank you so much. Let's go to, who's next? Grace Tan. Grace Tan. She's in Malaysia? Malaysia, Grace Tan. And Grace Tan is asking, how do you forget the past? Okay. From Puchong. How do you forget the past? For example, some painful incidents that might affect you. Okay, so one thing we do know is you can't forget the past. Like that's something that's almost an impossibility in your brain. Once, like your brain's like a recorder, and it keeps recording and recording, and it's always stored somewhere in your brain. Okay? So, I'm not sitting here saying, oh, you'll never forget. But you can learn to deal with the emotion that comes from it, resolving it, right? Having some type of closure with the things that happened in the past, right? And people will deal with things in the past. For instance, some people will, if it's with a person, they will deal with that person, right? And dealing with the person doesn't mean that you get your apology. Dealing with that person means that you finally understand why it happened. I'll give you an example. If someone really, really hurts you, closure could happen is if you find out, like they say sorry to you, that could be closure. Also, they might not say sorry to you, but you might find out more about their situation, like they had a very rough childhood, and you'd be like, oh, that's why. That could bring closure. Or that person could still be a terrible person, but yet when you realize, wow, they're still like that, then you realize the issue is just them, right? And there's no need for you to be worried about, or no need for you to be affected by it, because it's just them, right? That's just who they are. And of course, you could say the last one is when you can realize that sometimes you'll realize that you did something wrong too. But forgetting the past is a very difficult thing. It's more than forgetting the past. It's dealing or reconciling with the past, right? It's about reconciling, this is what is going on. Okay. And I think that is a thing that you're, Grace, that's one thing you want to do more than forgetting, because forgetting never happens. It's not about forgetting. It is getting closure and reconciling with what happened in the past. And that's a much, much better way to go with it rather than trying to forget it. Because I've seen people, because they're trying to forget it, the biggest problem is they can't. And they're praying, please God, let me forget this. And they never do. And they think, oh God, why don't you let me forget it? And the answer is because you're not going to forget. What's going to happen is the moment you deal with it, then you dealt with it. So it's not something that's always coming up in your mind. So as more and more memories come, it pushes back and back and back and back and back and back, right? If you don't deal with it, it keeps coming to the front. That emotion keeps coming up and keeps coming up and keeps coming up, right? And that's why it never goes away. But if you deal with it, then once you're done with it, you put it in a cabinet, close the cabinet, and you'll get more and more memories that push it further and further back. But it's because you dealt with it, okay? Let's move on to the next. Is this Joyce? Joyce in Hong Kong. Cool. Hey, we got a big variety of people today from different countries. Joyce in Hong Kong. It's difficult to focus in faith when life is hard. Good. Okay, yeah. And what can I do to not forget the Lord that's in front of me? All right. So forgetting the Lord in front of you, like we just talked about right now, is it's either when it's really, really difficult or when it's really, 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 really good. So you're talking about difficulties to focus on faith. What has to happen is the reason why we forget, or the reason why we don't focus on faith when it's difficult, because a lot of times we haven't created the habit, or we haven't created that solid relationship where we go to God for everything, right? So this is for everyone who's in faith. There's a lot of people that only go to God when it's really good and say thank you, or when it's really bad when they need something from God. So what happens is in the in-between times, right? In these main times, they're not really thinking about God. It's not a number one thing in their mind. What we have to learn to do is to develop the relationship where at all times I'm talking to God, right? Where this is a good drill or a good practicing thing that you should that is very good to learn, Joyce, is whenever a problem happens, the first thing you do is pray. Anything, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, pray right away. Like that will become your habit. Because before I talk to someone else, I'm going to pray to God and say, God, what the heck is going on? What the heck is going on? I don't understand this. Oh, God, why, right? But if you keep talking to God at the first instance when something is hard, then it becomes that habit that no matter what happens, when the difficulty comes, you might not be like, focusing on faith is not so much meaning that, oh, I got to pray 20 hours and I have to read the Bible. No, we're talking about, do you connect with God during that time? Right? When you talk to God as the first person you talk to. And if you have that habit, then it's going to be, becoming something that whenever it becomes difficult, it's like reflex. The first thing you do is go to God. Okay? So what can you do not to forget the Lord that's in front of you? Well, you only forget when you forget He's in front of you. As funny as that sounds, right? But you got to make the habit. And the reason why you forget is because He's invisible. But you have to make Him visible by always talking to Him. You have to see him with the eyes of your heart, right? And to see him with the eyes of your ears, which means hearing him, whether it's through the word, through people around you, and also feeling him or seeing him through the eyes of your heart, knowing he's there, okay? Thank you, Joyce. Good question, though. Great question. Let's move over to the Philippines. Wow, it's like 4 different countries already. Wow, long question. From Hannah. She says, I truly believe that the Lord loves us so much. It's just that sometimes I forgot to do the importance of my mission because of people that surround me, like conflicts. Okay, those things, sometimes I don't want to talk to them, but I need to because we're doing things to fulfill that purpose. Okay, yeah. Sometimes I cut off communications with them for me to have peace of mind. How will I handle those things? And there's two things that I think is, I don't think what you're doing is bad unless it's done in the wrong way. Like, because I think some of the things that you're doing is not bad. For instance, talking to them is very important. Communication, like I'm going to tell you right now, is communication is the number one thing to resolve all problems. Like it's almost like 97% that's going to resolve it. Where people didn't know what's going on. They didn't know they hurt you. You didn't know you hurt them. They don't know that you were that hurt. You don't know that they were that hurt. You don't know what you did to hurt them either. Like there's so many different things that could be going on. And so many different things that we don't even know about that's going on around us, right? Which means, and one thing that we don't even know is what is happening in their life that might be difficult. What's happening in my life that's difficult, that's making me more sensitive? What's making them more sensitive? What's making them more irritated? There are so many things that are happening that we have to have that humility to understand, well, I don't know what's going on. However, the good thing that I think here is that you have to sometimes cut off communications. I do think it's healthy first. If you're too emotional and it's really, really hard, it's good to step back, calm yourself down, and then get into the conversation again a little bit later. Like that, I do believe that's a very healthy thing because there's nothing worse than people communicating with each other when they're both emotional or even one of them's emotional because no conversation gets through. And that's why both sides, you can even just say, hey, I'm going through something right now, so just give me a little bit of time. I'm going to call you back tomorrow, right? And then your sole duty from that point on is to calm yourself down, to think about the full situation, right? Write down your thoughts, and then bring everything to the table again. Says, hey, yesterday I'm really sorry about that. I shouldn't have done that, but this is why this is why I'm having a little bit of trouble. And it's true. I would say that when you say mission, it obviously means it's probably something to do with church more than it has to do with work. Because when it comes to work, you have no choice. You get paid for it, you got no choice. The harder part about faith is when you do stuff at church, you're not paid for it. It's volunteer. And that's why it's a little bit harder. Because you don't have to do it. And that's why you're like, it's the feeling, this is not, people might not be overtly thinking this way, but I'm giving up my time to do this and I don't need to be treated like this. But if you're at work and you're getting paid, let's just say $10,000 a month, then you're getting paid for that. So it's like, yeah, okay, I got to deal with it. Why? Because I'm getting paid $10,000 a month. And it becomes something that's very normal and natural. When it's something that's more voluntary, this is when people are a little bit more extra sensitive to it. And that's when we have to kind of step back a bit and we have to begin to understand each other a little bit better. But one thing I do think that is very healthy for people is to understand each other's character and the way that people are able to, like there's a couple books you can read, like whether it's like 16 personalities, the MBTI stuff, that's very helpful. Also the 5 love languages, like there's so many different books that help us to understand people's characters a lot better and how we can talk to them in a better way. And those are some things that I do believe that we can, if we do a little bit of research, we can understand what type of character that they have, right? And if you understand what type of character that they have, you'll understand that some type of response is actually normal. I'll give you one example. Some people, their characters are they want to care for people, but the way they care for people is asking them how their day is. Hey, how's your day? How's work? How's this? How's that? And there's other people who don't like shallow questions. But then these people don't know each other very well, but they're trying to care by asking you these shallow questions, but that's the way they show love. And then you're like, no, I want deep questions. Oh, I don't want to deal with these questions, right? But if people understand each other much better, they're able to deal with each other in a better way. And you'll understand each other a lot more too. So I do think a lot of it is communication and understanding each other in a much better way too. And not understanding everyone from your perspective only. Because everyone is different, and the way we treat each other is different. The way we love each other is different. The way we think about each other is different too. Because the worst thing is if you think you're best friends and the other one doesn't, then there's pain, right? That's the difference in relationship, okay? So thank you, Hannah. Wonderful question, though. Good question, because that's something that a lot of people do go through. If anyone else has any more questions, that is the last question for today, and it's with a lot of time to spare. So if you guys have any other questions, you guys can just pop them in the room, and we can answer for the next one, or some of them we can answer for them on Thursday too. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us here on Lockdown Tuesday. It is July 7th. It's 7/7. I hope you guys enjoyed it. 7/7/2020. Go figure, right? I know, that was dumb, but either way, right? So I hope you guys had a wonderful time learning the story of Peter. Don't forget the past, and we will see you again next week on Tuesday. And those of you who are joining us on Bubble Talk will be on Thursday at 8 p.m. Malaysia time. Everyone, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you guys again. Bye-bye. Hey guys, thanks for watching. This is Sky. Make sure you click subscribe, obliterate that like button, leave some comments, and support us on Patreon. All right, catch you later.